Alright, y'all. So today I want to do a very quick review of a mini series that I saw recently, which was The Beach Boys: An American Family. This was a mini series that came out in the year 2000. It stars two episodes, each an hour and a half in length, basically. And it basically covers the Beach Boys' career from the beginning, their kind of origins as a band, all the way up to the 1974 revival of the band in the mid 70s. So my quick thoughts on this miniseries. So I've seen a lot of music biopics and versions, kind of dramatic versions of famous musicians' lives. And I was kind of interested to see how the Beach Boys ones was. Now, the Beach Boys, in my opinion, have a very interesting career. Most people know them for their surf songs, their summer songs, which absolutely, they absolutely deserve recognition for that. They're honestly, some of them are really great songs. Some of them are, I don't think have aged as well as others, but I think for the most part, the vibe they created was really cool. I mean, when I think of like summer songs, the Beach Boys really, innovated that art form of song. But I think what a lot of people forget is that after that kind of era, there was a whole different era of Beach Boys music that was experimental, was interesting. Some of it wasn't good, absolutely wasn't good. And their career obviously would decline, but it was a huge up and down and a very interesting story in general. And, I didn't even know about this when I was a kid because I always just assumed the Beach Boys was this surfing, rocking 60s band. But, yeah, so this miniseries attempts to go into the lives, and I think it goes out with mixed results. Personally, in my opinion, on one hand, I think I'm not like the hugest Beach Boys historian, but I definitely know something about their careers, and I think from what I understand, some of it is very well done. I think some of the actors here that are picked are really good for their roles. I thought that the actor they got for Murray's dad was pretty well done. Some of the Beach Boys casting, like the person they cast for Dennis was cool. Al Jardine was pretty cool. Carl, I think, was well done. Mike was done. Well, Carl's a mixed bag. Mike was well done, but Brian and Carl, especially Brian in this case, I think was miscast. I think that the actor especially who plays Brian, I think should have been recast. Personally, I don't really like his performance in this miniseries. It was a huge mixed bag. I think, start out with the pros and I'll get into the cons later. The look of the show looks good. Now, this is a 2000 miniseries, so don't expect high quality. But it, looks decent. It looks like they had a decent budget. Some of the, the sets, the locations sell it. They sell it as the 60s. They sell it as the 70s. The cinematography and directing and some of the shots are very well done. And like I said, some of the acting is really well done. The music obviously is, the Beach Boys soundtrack, so, take that as you will, but obviously that's pretty good as well. And yeah, I mean, I like some of that. And in general, a lot of the stories of interest here, I like some of the details they included here. For example, how Murray was towards his children. From what I understand, is pretty accurate. But maybe obviously exaggerated because this is like a fictionalized account. They definitely make you aware of that. But I think that was pretty good and handled. And I think in general, the first part of this miniseries, the first episode, is much better than the second part. It has a better flow to it. The origins is a bit more fascinating, and I think it handles it a bit better. I think it really falls apart when it gets to the second part. Now, let's get into some of my cons. One of the biggest problems with this series is the pacing. They're trying to squeeze in over a decade of career history with this band, and they don't do it effectively well. That's one of the biggest problems with this miniseries. They're really rushing for time, especially in that second part. And sometimes they also focus on weird parts that didn't happen the way they did that are extremely confusing. This is really a case scenario where the Beach Boys really need a full-on miniseries. And what I mean by a full-on miniseries is like 5 episodes, 6 episodes, or heck, do even a full season of television here, maybe 10 episodes. Do it like how the Wu-Tang series did, where that was basically a season of television. It had enough room and space to really expand and tell the story properly. if you're rushing all these events, they happen so quickly, you're going to be completely confusing your audience. And this is exactly what happens here. Events happen so quick, and then you just blink, and then they go. There's no context, there's no build-up, there's nothing. And it's so confusing. Like I said, I was able to follow this a bit more just because I am a Beach Boys fan. I know their career, at least parts of it, pretty well, mainly the stuff that happened in the late 60s. But it just, like I said, moved way too quick. And that's one of the biggest problems with this series. It needs more room to grow. I also feel like I mentioned earlier, some of the acting is pretty bad. I like some of the actors for sure, but some of them, like the actor who plays Brian Wilson, should have been recast. And in general, Brian Wilson is looked upon down in this show quite a bit. I was quite shocked. And like I said, Brian Wilson wasn't absolutely a perfect person. He, succumbed to mental illness in his later life, and, became less and less involved with the band. Absolutely, that's a huge part of Brian's character. But you have to do it with respect, right? You can't just constantly shit on this guy with mental illness. And I feel like, personally, they were just doing that when he had all these mental problems. They just kept shitting like, oh, why don't you make your songs, Brian? Like, just stupid shit like that. It's like, it just feels disrespectful. And I understand why Brian Wilson saw this miniseries and just made they felt like they made a schmuck of me. And it's absolutely true. I think they didn't do enough of how genius Brian Wilson really was. And they just kept focusing on the negative parts. Even when, he created Good Vibrations, arguably, in my opinion, their most iconic song, they just, blink and miss. They come out and then blink and miss. It's such a quick moment in the miniseries. And I feel like the way Brian was treated and the actor himself didn't do a good job. So that's my opinion. So the pacing, some of the acting, and also some of the moments in the series. For example, I don't even think Pet Sounds, arguably their best album, gets really a spotlight here. It's a blink and miss. It happens maybe in 20 minutes, and there's not really any build-up. That's all I'm saying. The pacing of this series feels completely rushed and off. And then Smile gets mentioned, which was their kind of experimental album that couldn't be made due to Brian's mental illness mainly. It gets mentioned here, and then it just kind of goes away. And then I don't even think they mentioned Sunflower or their Surf's Up album, which Surf's Up was actually a little bit of a revival for the Beach Boys in the early 70s before they had the big revival of their greatest hits album in 1974. But just like I said, so much history was thrown out. And then they also focus on the Dennis and Charles Manson thing, of course. And that's also extremely exaggerated. I mean, Dennis seems completely beholden by him, despite the fact that in our world, he rightfully got suspicious and got tired of Manson. Now, how it happened in real life, from what I understand, is that he basically was renting this place, and he let the rent agreement expire. He just did not pay rent. He let the rent agreement expire, and then they kicked him off his property. And then they went back to the ranch, and then eventually the events that would happen with the murder of Sheldon Tate, the actress in Hollywood, happened. But like I said, it's just some weird changes in history. And I just think, man, I don't know. Some of these changes feel weird. They feel disrespectful. I honestly think we need a new Beach Boys adaptation of a miniseries. It needs a full-on miniseries. We're talking 6 episodes, 5 episodes at least, covering the Beach Boys' career in the time span that this series does in only 2.5 or 3 hours, right? I think personally it needed more time to grow. It needed better writing throughout, better characterization, and just better story decisions. So yeah, this overall, in my opinion, Beach Boys and American Family, to wrap this video up quickly, is a huge mixed bag. On one hand, it does do some things correct, and some of the acting and scenes are pretty good, but for the most part, it suffers from massive pacing issues, honestly, some disrespectful betrayals of some of the Beach Boys here, specifically Brian, and, just bad writing, horrible pacing, not really showcasing why this band was such a great thing. And yeah, that's my kind of quick thoughts on this miniseries. Like I said, it's not completely awful, has its pros and cons. One of the coolest things too I wanted to mention is that it's also free on YouTube at the time I'm making this video. There's plenty of versions. There's a version I watched that was actually a upscaled 4K version, which I'll highly recommend. So yeah, it's another big pro is that this movie or this miniseries is free, so you can watch it online. It's pretty accessible. But yeah, my quick thoughts on the Beach Boys and American Family miniseries. Hopefully, you all have a good day, and remember to have good vibrations. Peace out, y'all.